Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for tuning in today. You're going to be so glad that you watched this program today because we're talking about brand new research pointing to the very best diet for weight loss, for cognitive health, for disease prevention. And I'll give you a hint. It is a variation of the ketogenic diet. My guest is Dr. Stephen Gundry, author of the book, Unlocking the Keto Code, the revolutionary new science of keto that offers more benefits without deprivation. Dr. Gundry, welcome to the program. So great to see you as always.
Lori, great to see you, and thanks so much for having me back.
So this is so exciting. It really hits close to home for me because you and so many other health experts have been promoting the ketogenic diet for years, and I have been trying to follow it because it does have so many benefits, but there are some very, very significant problems with it. It's very boring. There aren't very many choices. It's very restrictive. It's very high in saturated fat. And then, over the long term, it can sometimes lead to muscle loss and some other problems, cognitive issues. So talk about how you have taken the ketogenic diet and made it better.
Well, thanks, Laurie. You're right. You kind of listed off a lot of the things that are downsides of a ketogenic diet. And I mean, ketogenic diet, when it's done right, can absolutely cause weight loss, can make a lot of people feel better. And I've advocated my version of a ketogenic diet for the last 20 years. But interestingly enough, as I talk about in the book, my version of a ketogenic diet was not a particularly high-fat diet, and it actually had a lot of important carbohydrates, which are called polyphenols, and maybe we'll get into that. But the downside, like you say, is many people eating a very high saturated fat diet in an effort to get into ketosis, their cholesterol numbers look really scary to their health practitioners. And when I look at blood vessel health in people who are really, doing an 80% fat diet, having cream cheese with a side of bacon sprinkled with cheddar cheese, just as an example, and you can only do that so long before it gets really boring. These people actually have evidence of vessel dysfunction in their blood vessels that we can measure. They have evidence that their cholesterol numbers not only are high, but the cholesterol has become actually sticky and wants to stick to blood vessels. And of course, that's the last thing we want for long-term health. So in my program, I looked at, well, what are ketones actually doing? And it turns out that ketones are not some fabulous fuel that we should be trying to make 24 hours a day, but they're actually what are called signaling molecules. They tell our little energy-producing organelles in all of our cells, the mitochondria, and most people by now have heard about mitochondria and mitochondrial health, and they actually tell mitochondria to protect themselves, to literally not work so hard. And it's got a fancy scientific name that I wish it didn't have, but we're going to use it because that's what it's called. It's called mitochondrial uncoupling. Now, what the heck does that mean? Easiest way to think about it, almost all of us now have a pressure cooker, like an Instant Pot. And most people know that pressure cooker, if it builds up too much pressure, has a release valve, a pop-off valve, where it releases pressure, releases steam. And that's to keep the pressure cooker from blowing up. Now, my mother blew up a pressure cooker when I was growing up. It was very exciting. So mitochondria, making energy is really hard work. And there's actually a lot of pressure in the mitochondria that do damage. So we have a built-in system of these pressure release valves in our mitochondria. And they're called uncoupling proteins, and there are 5 of them. But the great thing is ketones, these little water-soluble fatty acids, actually tell mitochondria to blow off steam. And in the process of blowing off steam, mitochondria protect themselves from damage. They actually are told to make more of themselves, and the more mitochondria you have, the better your health. And the great thing is, as they blow off steam, they actually waste calories. And it's the wasting of the calories we eat that's actually causing the weight loss. The great news for everybody, including my patients, was that we can duplicate the effect of ketones popping off these pressure valves with other foods or other techniques, like, for instance, time restricted eating. Most people know that as intermittent fasting. And we can eat polyphenols. For instance, I'm having a big cup of tea, and tea is loaded with polyphenols. And every time I have a cup of coffee or tea, I actually release pressure valves in my mitochondria. So we'll drink up.
I love interviewing you because you always talk about the benefits of coffee, and I love coffee and also tea, and polyphenols, the olive oil, and things. So,
Yep.
just to kind of recap, we don't have to do the ketogenic diet to get the benefits of the ketogenic diet. We just go to right straight to the mitochondrial uncoupling to because that's the end result of the ketogenic diet. So with the ketogenic diet, the main thing is almost no carbohydrates. And you have modified that saying, yes, we can have carbohydrates, hallelujah, but only certain ones, the ones that are generally found in plant form. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, this was actually discovered a number of years ago with children with childhood epilepsy. Many people hopefully know that the ketogenic diet started in 1930 as a way to stop seizures in children. And this was long before any of the medications. And it was actually very effective. But that diet was 80% fat. And they found that kids, as any of us who have kids or grandchildren know, it's really hard to get kids not eat carbohydrates. It's nearly impossible. So a few years ago in the 80s, they said, hey, there must be a better way to do this. And so they started looking at MCT oil, medium chain triglycerides. And they found, lo and behold, that every time you took MCT oil, that it would produce ketones no matter how many carbohydrates you were actually eating. And so miraculously, they could put kids on MCT oil as their main fat and dramatically increase their carbohydrates and their proteins and still protect their brain. So ketones, MCT oil is different than any fat, any saturated fat, any fat, because MCT oil goes directly to the liver from the gut, and the liver instantaneously produces ketones, regardless of what you're eating. And I joke about this, but so you could have a fresh fruit salad, and can you imagine a person on a ketogenic diet having a fresh fruit salad, but taking a tablespoon of MCT oil, which is flavorless, colorless, and you would produce ketones, even though you had that fresh fruit salad. So that information is just mind-blowing, diet expanding, because if we get things like MCT oil into our diet and we can mix it with olive oil and have it on our salad, as I talk about in the book, the other miracle, I think, is that goat and sheep products actually have 30% of all their calories as MCT oil. And so you could have goat yogurt, you could have sheep yogurt, you could have goat cheese, you could have sheep cheese, and actually uncouple your mitochondria, blow off steam in your mitochondria. So there's so many exciting ways to actually duplicate the effect of a high-fat ketogenic diet without all the boredom of high fat. The third thing that you mentioned is we now know that polyphenols, and the way to remember polyphenols is poly want a phenol, like poly want a cracker. polyphenols are the way plants protect themselves from harm, from harsh conditions, from sunlight, and they protect their mitochondria, which are called chloroplasts, with polyphenols. So polyphenols are those bright colors that we see in the fall when the green goes away from the leaves, all those oranges and reds, and in berries, those dark colors. Those, when we eat them, do two things. They actually provide food for our good bacteria, what I call the gut buddies, but they're also converted into compounds that, son of a gun, uncouple mitochondria exactly as if you were on a ketogenic diet. So instead of this high-fat, boring diet, we can add polyphenol-rich foods, like you mentioned, olive oil, like coffee, like tea, like extra dark chocolate, and get the benefits of a high-fat diet without eating a high-fat diet. I mean, what's better than that?
Right, absolutely. All right, we're going to take a quick break and be right back to talk with Dr. Stephen Gundry about his new book, Unlocking the Keto Code. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Stephen Gundry, author of the book Unlocking the Keto Code. And Dr. Gundry, you really laid out the science of this modified ketogenic diet and the benefits. Let's get into the nitty-gritty about what you can have and can't have. And one of the things that I found really interesting was that you advocate a large number of plant-based foods, but also allow for some animal foods. You talked about just before the break, the sheep and the goat products. Can you elaborate on that? And also, where do we find those? I'm not used to seeing in the grocery store sheep and goats product.
Well, actually, they're there. If you go to Trader Joe's, you'll see a giant container of goat yogurt. It's in every Trader Joe's that I've ever been in. Some of the specialty stores like Whole Foods have both sheep and goat yogurts. Increasingly, we're seeing all sorts of great goat cheeses. There's even now goat cheddar, goat mozzarella. Just actually had some goat mozzarella and sheep cheese last night for dinner with the rest of my dinner, which was a big salad. So these are increasingly available. And believe it or not, you can find all these products on Amazon, and they'll ship it to you, refrigerated. So it's really easy to find these days. Most people know feta cheese, which is supposed to be made out of goat or sheep occasionally, but please read the label, because a lot of feta cheeses sold in the United States are actually made out of cow's milk cheese, and you will not get the benefit. A lot of people know Manchego cheese, which is a sheep cheese from Portugal and Spain. Easy to find. Costco carries it. Costco carries lots of goat and sheep cheeses as well. So it's remarkably easy to find if you look for them.
You talked about, in addition to those products, some other superfoods like apple cider vinegar, which I actually add to my olive oil every day for my salad dressing. Is a teaspoon a day enough?
Well, it turns out that the miracle of apple cider vinegar is that acetic acid, which is vinegar, is actually a short-chain fatty acid, which I talk a lot about in the book. And these short-chain fatty acids, like acetic acid in apple cider vinegar, also uncouple mitochondria, pop open that pop-off valve. And the more you uncouple your mitochondria, the healthier you are and the more weight you lose. And so that actually explains the miracle of apple cider vinegar. What I like to do is I like to make a spritzer out of San Pellegrino or other sparkling waters and put a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar or a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, or any vinegar for that matter, and use that as your new Diet Coke. There's no calories, and you'll enjoy this fizzy beverage, but you'll also pop off your mitochondria. Now, why would we want to do that? It turns out if we look at super, super old people who are thriving at 105, they have the most uncoupled mitochondria of any people. And so we now know that uncoupling mitochondria, opening up these pop-off valves, is really one of the secrets to great health and great longevity. And it's really easy once you know where these uncouplers are hiding, like apple cider vinegar.
And throw out a couple others besides apple cider vinegar.
So again, any of the fruits like blueberries, blackberries, raspberries are loaded with uncoupling compounds, polyphenols. But here's the deal. Our fruit has been bred for sugar content. For instance, an apple now has more sugar than an entire Hershey's candy bar. A cup of grapes has more sugar than an entire Hershey's candy bar. So as I talk about in the book, everybody's got a juicer at home. Get your juicer out, throw all these organic berries in, juice it, throw the juice away, it's pure sugar, and then take the pulp and stir it into goat yogurt or sheep yogurt or coconut yogurt, and you'll have this amazing, delicious yogurt that tastes like fruit. So you'll get a 1-2 punch. You'll get MCT oil from the yogurt, and you'll get polyphenols from the fruit. I call it reverse juicing in the book, and it's really easy to do. If you got some left over, throw them in ice cube trays and freeze them, and then stir them in. Makes an ice cream.
Wow, this is fantastic information. We're going to take another quick break and be right back with Dr. Stephen Gundry. The book is Unlocking the Keto Code. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Stephen Gundry. The book is Unlocking the Keto Code. And Dr. Gundry, you talked about so many of the things that we can enjoy, and they sound fabulous. But let's talk about the things that we really need to avoid. And you kind of highlight three main ones: trans fats, artificial sweeteners, and wheat. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, so trans fats are actually secretly hidden in so many of the foods we eat. If trans fats are less than 0.5 grams per serving, you don't have to put them on the label. And believe it or not, companies have actually lowered the serving size to hide the trans fats. Plus, if you're eating out, having fried food at a restaurant or a fast go place, they can cook in trans fat oil and not have to tell you about it. So there's a catch. So in general, fried foods outside the home are really dangerous. The second thing, it turns out that wheat and wheat products like oats, like rye, like barley, literally cause leaky gut. And leaky gut is not some pseudoscience. Leaky gut is proven. We can measure it on sophisticated blood tests. And leaky gut is one of the biggest causes of diabetes, heart disease. So please ditch the wheat. If you want to know more, it's in the book on why you should do that. And third question, sorry?
Artificial sweeteners.
Oh, yeah. Artificial sweeteners have been shown by Duke University to destroy 50% of the good bacteria in your gut. And the more we learn about health, we know we've got to have friendly bacteria, the gut buddies, to actually produce compounds that will actually uncouple our mitochondria. So why would we try to restore them with artificial sweeteners?
And you talk about trying to avoid lectins. This is a very complicated thing. A lot of people get very upset about it because you're talking about avoiding things that we think are healthy, like tomatoes and potatoes and beans. Can you briefly talk about lectins?
Yeah, lectins are a plant defense system that actually makes for leaky gut. And we measure this in our office every 3 months in patients. And lectins are designed to make you think twice about eating a plant or a plant baby. And you can defang lectins by using a pressure cooker. So you can pressure cook beans and make them safe. You can peel and de-seed tomatoes and peppers. In fact, most cultures that use tomatoes and peppers always peel and de-seed these products. Potatoes, the same way. You can pressure cook white potatoes. But the good news is sweet potatoes and yams have no lectins. The other great news is there's two grains, sorghum and millet, that have no lectins. You can even have sorghum popcorn, which is actually delicious. Corn is another real troublemaker. We forget that human beings have only been eating corn not human beings, but people from Africa, Europe, and Asia, and that's most of us, have only been eating corn for 500 years when Columbus brought it back. And that's a really short time to get used to a new food.
All right, we're going to take one final break and be right back with Dr. Stephen Gundry. The book is called Unlocking the Keto Code. Stay with us. Welcome back, and we are talking with Dr. Stephen Gundry about the wonderful new diet outlined in the book Unlocking the Keto Code. And Dr. Gundry, where can people find out more information about this book, about you, and all of the research that you've done for so many years that we've all benefited from?
Well, you can go to my two websites, drgundry.com, my supplement and food company, gundrymd.com. And for your listeners listening today, I'm offering a 30% off all my products at gundrymd.com. You just put the code Gundry30 at checkout. And everything, one time only, across my entire product line, just for your listeners, Gundry30 at checkout for 30% off everything. You can find the book at barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com. Please go to your local bookstore. I've had 4 previous New York Times bestsellers, so I can guarantee you they'll have the new book, Unlocking the Keto Code, in the bookstore. And COVID has been very hard on local bookstores, so please support them.
Such great information. I wish we could go on for another hour because, we just barely scratched the surface on some of the most important topics like intermittent fasting and the gut microbiome. So I definitely would encourage everybody to pick up the book. It's so important, not just for losing weight, but just for overall health, disease prevention, and as you mentioned, living long. That's the goal. So Dr. Gundry, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
Lori, great to see you, and I hope to see you again soon in the near future.
Likewise. All right, take care. And thanks to you viewers for tuning in to this edition of Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye now.